Hello and welcome to Builders. Today we're excited to chat with Rebecka Storm, co-founder and chief product officer at Twirl. Rebecka has led data teams at companies like iZettle and Tink, and she is passionate about using data to drive real impact. Rebecka is also a co-founder of Women in Data Science, AI, and Machine Learning Sweden, a non-profit focused on empowering women in tech. We'll dive into her journey, Twirl's mission, and her thoughts on AI's evolving role in tech and society. Rebecka, thank you so much for joining us. A warm welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Lovely to have you. Let's start, shall we, by talking a bit about your early career and leading data teams. Obviously, data science is transforming industries across finance, technology, and your careers, as I mentioned, included leading roles in data science at companies like iZettle and Tink. iZettle bought by PayPal some time ago. Tink part of Visa now, I think, since 2022, right? Can you tell us how you got started in the field of data science? What initially drew you to it? What excited you about it?
Yeah, of course. So I originally studied physics. I definitely did not expect to be doing data science. And I sort of very actively during my studies decided I did not want to do any kind of coding. I was super excited about physics. I wanted to do experimental physics, and my dream was to go work in a lab. So I did that for a year. I spent a year in California, in Los Angeles, working for a small X-ray startup. They were developing a new type of X-ray source, and I was in a lab. I was wearing one of these lab coats and walking around with a screwdriver in my hand, and I went to all these chemicals and stuff. And I realized this is not at all what I want to do. And I'm very happy I realized it then and not much later. It saved me a lot of years spent on kind of going deep into something that I wouldn't have enjoyed. But there was one part of that job that I really did like, which was running experiments and analyzing the results. So there was basically a data component to that job. And so I realized that was a lot of fun, and it was a cool way for me to use sort of my skills and interest in math. So it was kind of a way of applying all the maths I had studied to something real. So I learned to code in Python, and then basically decided this is what I want to do. And this is also when sort of data science as a field was becoming very sort of popular and exciting. So I was like, this is where I want to be. So this internship or the sort of 1 year I did in California, this was after my bachelor's degree. So what I did was after that, I went back to Sweden and I studied my master's, and that was focused on statistics and machine learning and programming. And since then, I've been in data.
Fantastic. Really, really interesting journey. Interesting to hear that you really didn't want to go down that route, and then kind of went full circle, and here you are. And I managed. I mentioned that you were working at Tink before. You were head of data and analytics there, I believe, right?
Yes.
And now managing large data teams and fast-paced environments like fintech, for example, this must come with its challenges, right? What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in leading data teams? How has this kind of affected how has this experience kind of affected or shaped your approach to Twirl?
Yeah, so there's many things I could say here, but I think one thing that's been really important for me throughout all of the roles I've had and at different companies has been to focus a lot on kind of the value we create. So as I think I mentioned, and as I think almost everyone knows, data is such a sort of hyped field. Everyone's very excited about data, and especially now with AI, and everyone wants to do data. And I think data as a field often struggles to live up to that promise. A lot of investment goes into data teams and data tooling, and this sort of promise of data being fantastic and delivering amazing results. And as sort of a data practitioner and then leader of data teams, it's always been really important for me to make sure that we live up to that hype or to that expectation. And that's surprisingly hard. So I think from very early on, I've been very focused on measuring the value of the work that I do, and then later the value of the work of my teams. And that's hard. That's a genuinely hard problem. And I think that's an idea that's gaining a lot more traction now than a couple of years ago when I started doing this. More and more teams are trying to figure out how to measure the value of their work, but it is hard. And sadly, I think the result is often that the value isn't as big as you were hoping. Once you kind of do the numbers, it's very hard to kind of attribute, especially when you're doing the kind of work that's about sort of enabling others and empowering, decision making and that sort of thing. So that I think has been one of the big challenges, estimating value and then communicating it. I think that's also a super important part. It's not enough to for you to know the value of the work you create, it also needs to be communicated and clear to everyone else.
Right. And any tips or any ways that you've been able to kind of overcome these challenges? How can you kind of concretely estimate value?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to try and to sort of not to just like tell yourself, oh, it's too hard, I can't do it, it's not measurable, and kind of move on.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important piece. Do whatever it takes, but make sure you do it. What we settled at iZettle was measuring or estimating the impact of all of our projects in monetary value. And there was a lot of resistance on this from the team. I think a lot of sort of ML engineers, data scientists, they're not excited about thinking in terms of like money. That's not what motivates them. They're not like they don't come to work in the morning thinking about, how can I make the most money on behalf, like for my company. And I get that, like that makes sense. But using any other kind of metric to measure the value of a data science or ML project becomes hard because it means it's not comparable. Like, for a specific project, you might be able to say, okay, like what I'm doing is I'm moving this particular metric by some number, but it'll be impossible to compare the value of doing that versus moving another metric that affects a different part of the company or product by some other number. And that's why we settled to kind of using monetary value for that was kind of the unit we'd use to measure, because it was comparable. Yeah. So I think that's also maybe my advice to not shy away from measuring value in money, because it's comparable across different projects and parts of the company.
Yeah, and still very, very relevant for across organizations, right? But you mentioned kind of iZettle there as well. You led teams focused on building both, internal products, but also kind of client-facing products there, right? How did that experience influence your approach to product development at Twirl?
Yeah, so that's had a huge impact, and definitely on sort of the product that we build at Twirl, because when I started out at iZettle, the first few machine learning projects that we built and delivered, they were basically internal products. So we did things like risk scores, we did credit scores. So these were like business critical applications, and used to power like customer facing products. So we did like actual product work. And then we moved on to doing more of like internal optimization and projects that were focused on kind of making internal teams more efficient. We worked with the sales team and the marketing team and a bunch of others. And when we were doing like the value estimates and the calculations, we realized that anything we do that's customer facing tends to be much, much more valuable. So as a team, we ended up focusing much more on like that kind of product development over time. And I think this is the answer and should be the answer to many data teams in the world. I generally think it's possible to create much more value if you focus on your customers and building products and features for them rather than optimizing internal processes.
Yep.
So that's been hugely impactful. Like this is basically the reason that I joined Tink after iZettle, because I was excited about working at a company that actually had sort of data products at its core. So iZettle is a fintech company. The main product is a payment solution for small businesses, whereas Tink, the product they sell is basically data and data with sort of different kinds of value added on top of it. So you can get transactions that are categorized by the type of transaction. You can get risk scores. You can get income estimates, like that sort of thing. These are like pure data products. The whole product revolves around data and processing it to add additional value on top. And that's what really excited me. I'm generally very excited about that type of data product over more traditional like analytics use cases. And this was also one of the triggers for building Twirl. Basically my co-founder and I had experienced like building this type of data product before and building it on top of like normal data tooling. And it's quite clear when you try to do that the tooling isn't designed for building that kind of product. Like the tooling is typically designed for like more traditional analytics use cases. And so it's a struggle to build customer facing products on top of like standard data tooling. And so that's like one of the big things we're addressing with Twirl is making that easier.
Fantastic. And let's go a little bit deeper into Twirl. Twirl's mission and indeed Twirl's future as well. You guys recently raised $2.5 million, if I'm not mistaken, right? In pre-seed funding. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Really nice. Could you walk us through the problem then that Twirl is solving for data teams, and how does it do it?
Yeah. So I mean, part of the problem is what I just described. Basically, modern data tooling isn't really designed for building products on top of. And so what data teams do is they basically face the choice of either doing it anyway, meaning you have to build lots and lots of things on top of traditional data tools to make them work reliably in like a customer-facing setting. Or you can build this as a back-end product. But if you do that, then you sort of don't get all the benefits of tools that are specifically designed for working with data. So we talk to companies that do both, and they sort of face different kinds of challenges depending on which approach they've taken. And what we're doing with Twirl is trying to build something that's sort of in the middle of these two. So it gives you the best of both worlds. You get sort of best practices from software engineering built into the product. These are often missing from traditional data tools, but you also get tooling that's optimized for working with data and not just sort of traditional backend that doesn't usually process data to the same extent. And then the other observation, which is related to this, is that data teams are spending so much time on tooling and infrastructure. And I think that has been by necessity. Data is a pretty new field. The tooling has evolved. Like the tooling is completely different now compared to like 2 years ago or 5 years ago. So it evolves really rapidly. And like data teams haven't had any choice but to invest a lot of their time into like setting up and maintaining tooling and infrastructure to enable them to run their data workloads. Yep. But that's changing. And basically Eric and I, so my co-founder and I, we felt that our teams are kind of reinventing the wheel, like where every company is spending time and effort on building good internal data tooling. And we basically set out to build that as a product instead. So our learning from working across several companies and talking to many, many more is that good internal tooling tends to look the same almost everywhere. You basically take a bunch of existing tools and you kind of string them together, and then you build additional features on top to make them easy and nice to work with in a consistent way. And therefore that should be possible to build as a product instead. So that's what we're doing.
Fantastic. And when you said that a lot of data teams are kind of focused on, you know, building infrastructure and stuff like this, do you mean to say as well that they're spending less time on maybe more kind of valuable activities such as kind of analysis, essentially? Right?
Exactly. And I think no one wants to spend their time on that, because that's like the plumbing. That's like the basics, or like the foundation that makes you able to then move on to like the kind of work that adds clear value. And also like these problems of like setting up inference tooling, they're not like business specific. They're the same problems across every other company. And I think what most data teams want to do is solve their own business specific problems, because those are the exciting ones, the ones that are unique to the company and sort of their data and their use cases.
Yep, that makes sense. And so Twirl is essentially positioning itself as this like data orchestration platform, right?
Correct.
Which differs somewhat from data integration tools. So like the integration obviously focusing on the kind of ELT process, right? The extract and load and transform and everything. Can you explain the key differences that you see between the orchestration platform and the integration, and how Twirl complements the integration platforms?
Yeah. So Twirl is an orchestrator. So Twirl is basically used to trigger different kinds of workloads. So to develop data pipelines that perform multiple steps, and it can actually be used for data ingestion. So getting data from various source systems into your data warehouse or data lake. So that's what a lot of our customers do from Twirl. But Twirl's main focus is on kind of getting everything to run together in a nice and smooth way. So it's an orchestrator that basically handles scheduling, and that gives you sort of a monitoring interface and alerting and those kinds of things that you typically get from an orchestrator. But it actually does more than most traditional orchestrators do, because it also gives you a developer experience that's like consistent across different types of data work. So it gives you a Python package and a CLI that you use for developing your pipelines, and sort of a framework for how to build pipelines. So it's a tool for ETL, I guess is a way to describe it. But we try to sort of describe it as an orchestrator, because I think that's the clearest way of describing like where does it fit into a typical data stack. So it replaces the need for an orchestrator like Airflow, which I think is like the most common one that data teams use today.
And tell us a little bit more about how you see the platform impacting businesses, and also kind of the broader kind of data ecosystem.
Yeah. So what typically happens among our customers is they are able to spend much less time on data engineering, or specifically the parts of data engineering that are related to setting up and maintaining tooling and infrastructure. So like data engineering is such a broad phrase, so it's impossible to kind of talk about data engineering as a whole, because it also consists of this piece of like building logic and pipelines, and that is very much still work that they need to do. But they spend significantly less time on that and much more time on their logic. I think that's the big impact that using Twirl has on them. And a lot of the companies we work with, they kind of start talking to us because they're facing a big investment into tooling and infrastructure. Usually they have some setup already. They have some ways of running code. They might be using, managed services like Cloud Run or Fargate to run some jobs. They might be using dbt. They might have some like ingestion jobs that are custom or on Airbyte. And they're kind of struggling to like keep everything together and get one consistent view of what's going on. And so a common trigger for sort of wanting to talk to us and considering to start using Twirl is they realize this isn't working anymore. This isn't scaling, and we need to kind of invest into better tooling and a better stack. And when they start using Twirl, that basically means that investment goes away. So in practice, what that usually means is like allocating 1 or 2 full-time people for several months or hiring someone. And once they start using Twirl, they can instead kind of spend that effort somewhere else and on building like actual pipelines on top of Twirl instead. So that I think is the biggest value. Then I think we tend to also hear sort of nice things from our customers about how it's like makes their job more fun. One of our early users has even talked about Twirl as like an addictive tool because she really likes the experience.
Wake up in the morning and say, "Gotta get on Twirl."
Exactly. She really likes the experience of developing and kind of the feedback loop and the cycle of developing. So yeah. That's of course a nice benefit also, but the main thing is kind of getting started quicker and spending less time on inference tooling.
Yeah, and I'm assuming this is kind of obviously compatible across kind of larger enterprises and also kind of smaller data teams. But what could you talk a little bit about any differences there in the kind of use case here for these?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different use cases for Twirl. One big category of our users are building data products. So the way that I described before, maybe I should like properly define what I mean by a data product, because I feel like I've referred to it several times without being very specific. So when I talk about data products, I mean building customer-facing products that like fundamentally revolve around processing data. So you're not kind of processing data to like give an insight or like show a number somewhere. It's like a core piece of the product is to process data. And many of our customers do this. So many of our customers are companies where their main product revolves around data processing and kind of adding some sort of value to it. So we have one customer in the US that I think I like to use as an example. So they offer a product that helps e-commerce companies optimize their marketing. So they help them identify basically which ones of their users should they be targeting in their campaigns. So what they do is they pull in a lot of data on behalf of their customers, and then they analyze it and they aggregate and clean up, and then they apply some machine learning, and they end up producing a result, basically a list of like accounts that they should be targeting in their marketing and accounts that they shouldn't bother spending time and money on interacting with. So I think that's a good example of a data product, and they've built their entire data processing on top of Twirl. And we have several customers like that who build this type of product that revolves around ingesting data either on behalf of their customers or sometimes from public information, but very often from their customers, and then applying multiple steps of processing and delivering some sort of result back to those customers. So that's one main use case, and sort of the one that Twirl was like originally designed around. And then another common one is more of the sort of traditional data team. So the traditional data team that might be doing, some analytics, they're running dbt, they might be doing some machine learning, they might have like a lot of ingestion logic, they might be pushing data to third-party systems, and they're basically just looking for sort of a faster and easier way to do all of that work from one place.
Really interesting. But moving on into kind of, women in data science and, this kind of gender diversity is a hot topic and rightly so. I think just for context as well, in 2023, women made up 22% of AI professionals globally. I think it was 26% in the field of data science, and then far less in fields such as, cloud computing and DevOps, for example. So there's a huge kind of gender disparity in the tech industry. You are obvious. You're kind of women being underrepresented in data science and AI, this is close to your heart. You're working with, I mentioned the women in data science, AI, and machine learning in Sweden. This is helping close that gap. But what inspired you to co-found this organization? I think it's connected largely to the same organization, to Stanford's global initiative, right? So how did you get involved in this, and what was the inspiration here?
Yeah, it's very random. But I basically, me and the two other women I co-founded it, we did this for like selfish reasons. We basically all felt lonely. We felt lonely as data practitioners or data scientists, and we wanted to meet other women that were also in data science, and we kind of struggled to find others. So we started this because we wanted to kind of find others and kind of collect everyone in one place and feel less lonely. And then from there, it's kind of taken off and just kept growing. But the way it started was actually, I didn't know any of my two co-founders, Galina and Sara. I didn't know them from before at all. I saw a post on LinkedIn from Galina. So she had heard about this WID's Stanford initiative. So this is basically, it's an initiative running out of Stanford. They organize an annual conference, and then they let you basically sign up as an ambassador, and you can run like a satellite event in different cities in the world. And I wish I had a number here, but I think there's hundreds, if not thousands, of satellite events like this every year taking place around the world. Some of them are on the same date as the main one in Stanford, and others are not. Some of them live stream the event from Stanford, but others kind of do their own event with their own speakers, and that's what we've always done.
Yeah.
But Galina had basically heard of this. I think she had heard of someone who was organizing. I think she had met someone who was organizing this in London. She was like, we should have this in Sweden. And she had posted on LinkedIn and said, does anyone want to help me organize this? And I didn't know her, but this showed up in my LinkedIn feed, and I was like, I have to do this. I really want to be part of this. I really want to meet other women in the field. And so it ended up being the three of us. So Galina and Sahar did know each other from before. I was the odd one out. We organized our first conference on, I think it was on March 14th. So it was Pi Day, which we thought was funny. And we invited, we sort of put out a public invite, and, we were we'll be lucky if 20 people sign up. And we had a venue that could seat 100 people, and the event was fully booked within a few days. And we ended up with we could only fit 100 people, but I think we had another 200 on the wait list. And it was very clear to us that there's demand for this. There are actually a lot of women in data science, but we're we tend to be spread out. So we don't always see each other a lot. There's usually not many women in each individual data team, but when you kind of add them all up together, there is actually many. And a lot of them were very excited to come and meet others. And we basically did this as a technical event because we felt there are many other events already for women to kind of meet other women in technical roles and kind of discuss what it's like to be a woman in the field. And we wanted the focus to be different. We wanted the focus to be on kind of the work that we do and the data science or data part rather than the focus on being a woman. So we have always and continue to run these as technical events. So we have technical speakers, and we basically feature women on stage that speak about deeply technical topics. So the point is you come there and you basically learn new things from other women in the field and hopefully get inspired and both sort of learn new things and feel less lonely as a woman in the field.
Fantastic. Really, really nice initiative. Are there any key programs that you've launched here that you would say?
Yeah, so we do several things. So this has grown a lot over the years. So it started off as just this annual conference that was part of the WID's Stanford initiative. But then we decided we don't want to do just a conference once per year. So we basically turned this into an organization that lives throughout the year. And we've done meetups. We've launched a mentorship program. We have a speaker database. We've done book clubs. There's been a lot of sort of smaller initiatives branching out from this. We have also organized the WID's Nordic conference that's done in collaboration with other sort of women in data science communities in the other Nordic countries. That one is completely online. I think this one takes place in about a month, so I can promote it a little bit. You can sign up for that if you're interested.
You had it here.
So it's grown, but the main thing is still this conference in March every year. That's the biggest event of the year. And I missed the last one, but I think the one before that had 200 plus attendees. Our biggest event ever was supposed to be in March 2020. I think you can guess what happened with that. We had a venue booked for 400 people.
Bad timing.
So since then, we've sort of not dared to make it quite as big again. But yeah,
but it's on Pi Day each year, is it? Or?
Not always. We moved
okay.
around a little bit. It depends on the day of the week, and we try to avoid the Swedish sportlov and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Sometimes we've done it on March 8th, so International Women's Day. I think that's why it's in March originally, but the specific date shifts around a little bit.
Got you. So you've got National Women's Day and Pi Day that it could fall on.
Exactly. We usually aim for one of those if possible.
Nice. Really nice. A really, really nice initiative. But I mean, generally speaking, despite progress, you could say there's still clearly work to be done in increasing this kind of gender diversity in tech as a whole. But what would you say are some of the kind of actionable steps companies and educational institutions as well can take to kind of better support women in entering these fields?
That's a great question. I think there are many things. One is related to interviewing and hiring. I think one of the most important, and I've done a lot of recruiting and hiring myself, and I think one of the most important things that you can do if you are recruiting, if you're doing any kind of hiring for data roles, is to make sure that you have a diverse pool of candidates to choose from. And I think it's not enough to kind of just put out an ad and say, we'll see who applies. And, if it was like 90% guys, then, that's unlucky. Yep. Like, I think it's really important that if you don't have enough women applying, then you need to go find them. So for me, this is really important when recruiting for data roles. Like, I would work closely with recruiters and basically ask them to go find candidates so that I would have like a diverse pool of candidates to choose from. So basically, if you think of like the recruiting as like a funnel, making sure that you have like a reasonable gender split at the top of the funnel. And then after that, definitely do not take gender into account in the recruiting process. Like, I'm not in any way arguing that you should sort of hire women to have more women in your team. I think that's a terrible idea, and I think no one wants that. I would certainly not want to be hired because of my gender. Right. But I think kind of forcing yourself to have enough female candidates at the top of the funnel is a great way to kind of overcome biases around, like, for example, women are less likely to apply for roles if they don't tick all the boxes. I think women tend to sort of come off as differently in sort of screening steps and that sort of thing. So it's a way of kind of making up for some of those sort of built-in biases.
Yeah.
So I think that's one very specific thing. But then I think it's also really important not to just try to like recruit more women, but to try to make the ones you have happy and get them to stick around. And I don't think there's anything specific you need to do to target women, but I think it's very important, like as a manager, as a leader of teams, to make sure that everyone in your team is basically happy, that they're respected, that they feel they're doing meaningful work, that they're respected by their colleagues, that they can kind of make their voice heard, that they can kind of share opinions that might differ from what everyone else thinks. So sort of psychological safety. Exactly. And I think this isn't specific to women, but I think it's when I hear about women who kind of leave toxic environments, it's very often because their teams have failed to provide that kind of safe environment. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, really well put. Very important points. But shifting focus to kind of a little bit to AI and ethics, are kind of a lot happening in this field, of course, and a lot evolving. I mean, there's considerable amount of information, people talking about the productivity boosts attainable. For those kind of successfully integrating AI into their processes, right? But what are your thoughts on the role ethics should play in the ongoing kind of AI evolution?
Yeah, that's a broad question, but of course, I think ethics are super important. I often get frustrated in sort of the public debate around AI ethics because I feel it often focuses too much on sort of theoretical problems of the future rather than the problems that we face here and now. I feel like a lot of the conversation, and this is especially, I think, among those not working themselves, like hands-on with AI, a lot of the conversation is around, what happens if AI takes over humanity and, that sort of thing. Whereas what I think is important is to think about what impact AI is having here and now. And it has a huge impact on sort of what information we see because of recommender systems. It has a huge impact on sort of how we view the world. And I think with Gen AI tools, I think that gets even worse because AI will like generally always like stick with whatever patterns you see in data. So like if you build LLM based on all text data in the world, the text data of the world is heavily biased towards men and men's work, and sort of preconceptions about sort of men versus women, and I think that basically leaks through and basically reinforces all of those, and I think that is a huge problem, which we're not talking enough about, and we're talking too much about sort of the theoretical future instead.
Yeah. It's a really good point. It's like you say, there's so much talk about people losing jobs or or whatever at some point in the future, but there's a lot happening now, and yes, it's a big risk, isn't it, that all the data being fed into these LLMs is based on specific biases from the past as well. So really, really good point. And talking about and keeping on AI, generative AI, I mean, obviously it's opening the doors a lot when it comes to kind of creative problem solving and indeed with product development. How do you see the tools kind of influencing creativity in tech? What are some of the exciting possibilities that you foresee?
It's a hard question. I'm not one of these people who have this amazing bright view of the future and all the amazing things we'll do. I'm more of a skeptic. I'm sure AI will change the world, but I think it'll sort of take longer than what most people think, and sort of not happen in the ways that most people think. But for creativity specifically, I don't know. I find it very useful for when I write text, regardless of kind of context, whether this is sort of an email or a LinkedIn post or a proposal or whatnot. It lets me be more crisp in what I say and write. So I'll sort of write text and I'll use AI to basically condense it or make it more to the point and shorter. What I think it does very poorly is kind of stick with how I speak or write. I basically end up editing back to make it sound like me because I want to sound like me.
Tone of voice and stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly. I'm sort of constantly disappointed by the ability of modern day LLMs to kind of maintain my tone of voice. I hear a lot of people saying, they train an AI to sound like them. I've never seen that done successfully. I wish it could be done successfully, but I haven't seen that work yet. But creativity specifically, I don't know if I have much more to say than that.
No, and what about the biggest opportunities that you see for the work being done and productivity when it comes to data science specifically? How do you see kind of AI and machine learning and everything kind of enhancing your working environment at Twirl, for example, and the products that you're working with?
Yeah, so we have some parts of our team have used GitHub Copilot for a while, and I know my co-founder Eric is using Cursor right now. I think the general feeling has been, this is sometimes helpful. It can sometimes make things a little bit faster than coding something from scratch, but it's not the amazing 10x productivity type improvement that you hear people talk about. So I think in our experience, it hasn't quite sort of lived up to expectations yet. But then again, I think expectations are inflated. I do think the way that we write and develop code will change completely over time. I just think we're kind of expecting too much here and now. That's generally my experience of working with sort of data and ML over time is people tend to kind of overestimate how much can be done in the short term and how good performance you can get from models in the short term, but then underestimate what you can achieve in the long term. I think few people saw ChatGPT coming and basically how good that would get in such a short period of time compared to just the years before. But then on the other hand, now I think people have completely unrealistic expectations on what can be done. So I think we'll get there, but more slowly.
And do you know any more your co-founders' kind of initial feedback on using Cursor? I'm just a little bit curious. A lot of our kind of developers in our network are using GitHub Copilot. A large majority are. I'm very curious to hear kind of feedback on Cursor and other tools as well.
Yeah, I wish I could ask him instead, but I think he's felt there are some benefits over Copilot and sort of the context across multiple files is helpful. But as with all the other Copilots, it also makes mistakes and sort of misunderstands, and it's not a silver bullet that just suddenly solves everything.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And when it comes to AI and kind of AI becoming more accessible to non-technical users, do Do you see, or do you think we risk kind of oversimplifying or misusing such tools? Obviously, like it's democratizing a lot of kind of tech processes here, so it's accessible for non-technical users, like I said. But how do we kind of essentially what I'm trying to say is how do we strike the right balance between ease of use and maintaining kind of accurate systems, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I generally very much believe in making technology available to people. I don't think there's much point in kind of making it so hard to work with that only a few select people can. I think that's generally not a good idea. But of course, like as more and more people use AI tools, that means we need to improve AI literacy. It becomes really important to understand, like, for example, we talked about earlier, how historic data impacts what results you get back from AI tools. And I think a lot of users have no idea. So I think similarly to how we discussed that kids should kind of learn coding in school and sort of they need to be more familiar with that type of concept to be basically ready for the future or even like the current world. I think the same goes for AI. It becomes important to teach AI literacy and a basic understanding of these systems and how they work and how they're designed. But I don't believe in putting up guardrails. I don't think that's the way to go. I'm very happy that AI tools are sort of more available to the general public than they used to be.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I can agree as well. You spoke there a little bit about obviously a lot of people kind of suggesting or kind of recommending for kids of today kind of learning to code when in school and everything. But obviously with this, the explosion in AI and ensuring that they are kind of AI literate and everything like that. What advice would you give to anyone really looking to start their careers in data science and AI?
I think first you need to learn how to code. I think that's kind of the basics. I would learn Python first. I learned it myself from a tool called Code Academy. I think they're still around, but I know there's also tons and tons of other tools out there. Yeah. I think there's few ways that you can do sort of impactful data work without having some basic understanding of coding. You will also need to learn SQL, but I wouldn't start there. I would start with Python. And then I would also try to, as quickly as possible, find a way towards learning this on the job. So not spending too much time on sort of online classes or tutorials or boot camps or that sort of thing, but getting yourself into a position where you can learn at a company, because you'll face completely different types of problems. You'll learn much more. And I talk to a lot of people that I meet through like women in data science at our events and stuff that are looking for like ways to transition into data science. And very often they already work in something that's like similar. They might be working in marketing, for example. And then my recommendation is typically to like look for marketing roles where they can kind of start doing more data work. So kind of leverage what you're already good at. And because like you're unlikely to be hired into a pure data science role if you have zero work experience from doing data science, but basically using whatever you already know as like a segue over to data. So looking for like a marketing role where you can do some data work also and kind of gradually learn and work with like real data and sort of gather some experience. And later you'll be able to kind of be hired for a pure data science role. So yeah, I think that those are my two important pieces of advice. Learn Python and look for a way to learn on the job.
Yeah, I think it can't be underestimated how effective learning, kind of on-the-job learning can be, right? I've done a lot of that myself, particularly with SQL as well. And yeah, I personally, and I think it goes for a lot of people as well, I learn much more effectively that way.
Yeah. And I think it's both because you'll face more realistic problems, but also because for data in particular, like you can't really separate the tools and the processes from the data itself. So like writing SQL code on some dummy database that doesn't have realistic data is very different from writing SQL code against a real production database that is messy and big and like complicated to understand. So it's also because if you work on like hobby projects or like open source or like boot camps and stuff, like you won't be working with realistic data. So that also means you won't learn all the things that you need to learn. Yeah.
No, very, very good pieces of advice here. But before I start wrapping up, I'd like to just hear a little bit more about kind of the ambitions for Twirl. What are you looking to implement over the coming year or two or whatever it might be? When was Twirl founded, by the way? Just
2 years ago, in 2022.
And you got that pre-seed round already. lofty ambitions, I would assume. What are the plans?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're gradually like expanding the product and expanding the team and onboarding more and more users. So it's sort of a continuous growth journey. And there's a huge list of features that we want to build and different concepts that we want to add to the platform. Our long-term ambition is basically to be the standard way of building data products. And I think that's bold. Obviously, we won't be there right away, but that's where we're aiming. We want to build a huge company, and we think every company in the world will be building data products soon.
And this is obviously like a global product, or obviously
yes,
it can be. And but has your initial focus been here in Europe or in the Nordic markets, or?
We have customers across Europe and the US, so not any like specific region. We have more in Sweden, of course, because we know more people here. It was sort of an obvious way for us to get started, but we're not limited to any specific region. Currently Europe and US, but nothing stopping us from onboarding users in other parts of the world as well.
Exciting. And any other kind of specific plans with the with funding in place and everything?
No, we keep building. We keep building and making the product better and better.
Nice.
I think a lot has happened already sort of in the past 6 months. And we're making a lot of progress pretty quickly. So very excited about that.
Exciting. And congratulations once again on that funding and
thank you.
On the journey so far. But Rebecka, is there anything you'd like to add before I do wrap up?
I don't think so. This has been a super interesting conversation. Lots of fun and important topics covered.
Yes,
very
indeed.
glad I got the chance to talk about diversity in the field. That's definitely sort of a topic close to my heart.
Yes, and I can imagine to many, myself included. But Rebecka, thanks so much for joining us, for sharing your insights, for sharing everything about Twirl's journey so far. It was really, really interesting, and really nice to hear your kind of your thoughts on and the contributions you're making to women, this movement here, and women in data science and AI and machine learning. So really, really, really nice. Wish you the best of luck moving forward at Twirl. And to our listeners, please be sure to check out Rebecka's work at Twirl. Thank you once again for tuning in. And until next time on Builders, keep innovating and keep on building. We'll see you next time.